special, and few of us have ever been close to such a thing, either when it's actually earning its keep or we're absolutely privileged to have it at this rally. What can you tell us about it?
Thank you very much. It's a Caterpillar 657B motor scraper. Unfortunately, it's the very last 657B left in the UK. At one time, the 657 was about the most prevalent tractor in the UK. It was used on everything, muck shifting, open cast coal mining, you name it. If there was a lot of muck to be used, there'd be a fleet of 657s on it. The big users in the UK were people like C.A. Blackwell, Merrimans, Wimpys and Langs, McAlpines, John Jones. There was, they were the absolute iconic 1960s and 1970s British scraper tractor, really. Unfortunately, with the rising cost of fuel and running two engines, as you can see, they very quickly became out of favour. By the late 80s, early 90s, there was very few of these machines being left, and then in the early 2000s, it had pretty much died out altogether. The last contractor running 657s was a gentleman called Neil Becher from Kent, and he ran 6 of these tractors, and number 49, as you can see painted on the trunnion, was one of his. This machine worked all over the country for Neil, along with his 5 counterparts, until about 2006, when Neil got a contract in South Africa, and as far as everybody understood, all of the 657s had got shipped out to South Africa. The story went that he took 5 out there whole, as they are, shipped them out there, and that one of them, the poorest one of them, got cut up and the spares harvested, put into containers and sent over to keep the other 5 going during the job. And to be honest, if you talk to anybody who's been a muck shifter for many years, the stories will always be of 657s. They were the iconic scrapers, I say, and everybody in the sort of preservation movement to do with heavy plant, us included, we were all sort of a little bit disheartened that such an iconic machine, there was none left in the UK. And that was the same, as I say, from about 2006, 2007. Then, in January this year, I had a phone call from a scrap metal dealer in Leeds to say that he'd been asked to cut a 657 up, and it seemed a shame, as when he went to view the machine to price cutting it up, it was still at work. I spoke to him on the phone and said that I thought he was wrong, that there wasn't any left, but I'd come and have a look at it anyway. So I went up to the power station up in Leeds where it was working on a coal tip, and as soon as I got out the van and could see this machine up on the stockpile, I knew immediately what it was. And it's a little bit like getting married, or maybe even having your firstborn child. Your heart sort of skips a beat a bit, really. Well, probably more than getting married, actually. It is a 657 after all. Then we managed to do a deal. I bought it for what scrap money was at the time, minus the weight of the tyres. Incidentally, the tyres, if you had to buy a tyre for that now, the majority of the tyres on the machine, each tyre would set you back somewhere about £18,000 per tyre. So, there's considerable values worth of tyres around the machine, although they are a little bit worn. The 657B series tractor came out in the early 70s, superseded the 657 standard series machine, and it had a few advancements which Caterpillar led the way with motor scraper technology. Behind the rear of the cab, or the front engine then, or the front part of the machine, where the swan neck curves up round and connects onto the bowl, that area there is what's known as the hitch. But what Caterpillar did, very advanced, was put a linkage mechanism in there and a ram with a set of accumulators, and they called it their cushion hitch. And basically what that does is, when you've got your bowl full of material, you flick a switch in the cab and that ram comes alive, travels up about 8 or 10 inches, and then when you're hammering on down the haul road, the bowl will float in relation to the front of the tractor. The one thing that these motor scrapers all have a terrible reputation for is when you're fully loaded, they start bouncing. And drivers who drove the early TS24s and the early 657s, if they did sort of 5 or 6 years continual scraper driving, that was then pretty much done then. The back and the body wouldn't stake anymore. There's only so much you can have your organs thrown up and down on a seat of a machine. But this cushion hitch pretty much eliminated it. it sorted the job out, no problem at all, and it was a major advancement in scraper technology. They were a little bit troublesome, there was a lot more moving parts, more linkages, but the majority of scrapers after about 1971-72 were all fitted with cushion hitches. So back to the machine then, twin engine as we say. Back engine is a 6-cylinder turbocharged Caterpillar diesel engine, 3406. Its sole purpose is to just drive the transmission and drive the back wheels. That's controlled by the front cab with a separate throttle pedal which is operated via an air circuit, and that engine is 500 rack horsepower. The front engine has a lot more to do. The front engine has to drive the compressor for all the air on the machine. It has to drive the transmission, all the hydraulics, and when you're digging, obviously the hydraulics are taking a lot of grief. The steering pumps also. So that engine is 550 horsepower, and that's a Caterpillar V8, 3408 in the front. So when you're working, you've got, if you were just using the scraper, you've got 1050 horsepower going through the cutting edge. But that still isn't enough. If you're on a job digging clay or muck, that isn't enough horsepower to fill the bowl. So what you do then is you get two Caterpillar D9s of about 425 horsepower apiece, and on the rear of the machine you'll see there's a great big steel block. You put the first D9 up against it, and the rear of that D9 has got a steel block the same, and you put a second D9 up against that, so you throw another 800 horsepower into it, so you've got very nearly 2,000 horsepower going through the cutting edge. And these scrapers are capable of holding 40 cubic metres of muck, which is 15 cubic yards, and at 40 cubic metres, with clay at about 2.1, 2.2 ton to the cube, you're getting towards 90, 95, nearly 100 tonne of muck in the bowl. The tractor itself weighs 75 tonnes, it's 15 foot 5 wide, and it's 65 foot long. And to move it nowadays is quite a job. You know, it costs nearly as much to get it from Leeds as it did to buy the machine. So I don't think it'll ever leave the yard. But it's nice to have one preserved. There's so many stories, there's that many people, since people have known we've got it, have come with photographs and stories. One of the stories was that Merriman's had a job on the M25. They finished an open cast coal site in Doncaster, and they needed to get 5 for Frenchies down to the M25. The M1 being newly opened, they just drove 6 of them straight down the M1. And we've got a number of photos of that happening with police escorts. These machines are capable of about 45 miles an hour. Massive diameter brakes front and back to try and stop the thing when it's, you know, fully loaded going down a haul road at 40 mile an hour, and the driver's on bonus for the amount of loads he does, and you've got a foreman pushing you on every load as well. As you can see when I'm driving it around, the front end of the machine sort of twitches a bit when you're steering. It's not because I'm a bad driver, it's just how they are. The steering's a bit digital really. You sort of tilt the wheel and nothing happens, and all of a sudden off it goes. It's quite a tidy example of a machine. It is getting fairly warm. Those of you who are in the know a bit, you'll notice the back engine's breathing a little bit now, but I suppose at that age it's allowed to do that. So the main component parts of a scraper then, you've got the bowl which holds the muck. You obviously got the muck catcher over the top, which has got the mesh on. You've got the apron, which is at the front, and when I get back in the tractor I will demonstrate all the functions of all the bits and pieces. The apron is the part that lifts up and contains the muck in the bowl, so when you open your apron sort of a foot, dive into the floor, once the bowl's full, shut the apron, lift the bowl up, or the apron shuts as you lift the bowl, travel to wherever you're going. When you get there, raise the apron up and then hydraulically push the back plate forward, which then pushes the material out. Now, bearing in mind how far you have the cutting edge off the floor when you're tipping the material, that's how thick a layer it'll lay back on the floor. So if you took a modern earth moving job now where you would have an excavator and a dump truck and a bulldozer, you dig it out the ground with the excavator loaded onto the dump truck, then another driver drives the dump truck to the tip, tips his load off, and then the bulldozer driver then levels and compacts the tip. Well, if you think about a motor scraper, one man sits in the machine, he digs himself, the other D9s that are pushing him keep the tip, the cutting area tidy, and 2 D9s would service sort of 5 or 6 of these scrapers depending on how far the haul was. Once he's then got his load, he then carries it to the tip, and when he gets to the tip, he grades and compacts the tip at the same time. So, you know, it's amazing why they have gone out of fashion, really. One reason is obviously the fuel. Caterpillar machines are very heavy on fuel. I mean, this machine working nowadays, if you were on a good haul with hard digging, you would probably put 750 litres of diesel in the front engine and probably 650 litres in the back engine. A diesel at 72 pence a litre, it very quickly adds up. So what we'll do is I'll lift the bowl up now and I'll show you a few functions of what does what on the scraper, and then I'll have a couple of laps around the ring, and then I'll go back and park up, and I'll stand by the scraper for a few minutes. If you've got any questions, come and see me then.